Welcome to this RecSport Education Special. The story of Jim Thorpe, American athlete and Olympic gold medalist. Jim Thorpe is hailed as the greatest athlete of the first half of the 20th century. It goes without saying this is undoubtedly true. His athletic accomplishments are well documented and respected by all historians of his day and ours. We might, however, ask, what kind of life lived could cultivate such an individual with such abilities and fortitude? Jim's life was certainly not easy. Having been born in 1880, Jim would face all the hardships of growing up in such a time. Working all manner of physically demanding jobs on farms, chasing and breaking wild horses, spending free time outdoors in activities such as running, swimming streams, fishing, wrestling, and all else a young man could get into in those days. We must bear in mind that the country was a very different place then. This was still a time when the Industrial Revolution was getting its stride, and much of the world was still very much without modern amenities and understandings. Modern indoor plumbing and sanitation standards, for one, didn't become normal everyday practice until the 1950s. Medicine in those days was still full of superstition and unscientific practices. Automobiles weren't even commonplace until the 1920s. Such as the times were, tragedies were far more common and devastating than they are today. At a young age, Jim lost his twin brother Charlie to pneumonia. The two had been inseparable until then, and Jim had a hard time adjusting to the loss, as anyone would expect, especially so for the 8-year-old boy that he was. A few years later, his mother also died due to blood poisoning. And then, his father became ill and passed, leaving young Jim an orphan before his teens. But this was by no means the summation of Jim's difficulties. You see, Jim was born to a native tribe, the Sox Fox tribe, and is believed to be a descendant of Chief Black Hawk, the celebrated band leader and warrior from the American Sox Midwestern tribe. Despite this auspicious heritage, Jim lived in an era of the United States where racial prejudice was common for anyone who wasn't white Protestant. Native American children were forced to attend schools to teach racial integration. They were forbidden to speak their native language, and forced to dress and live like the average white American. All aspects of their cultural heritage were meant to be stripped away. It is especially notable that Jim was able to perform and receive such recognition for his athletic talents long before the United States Congress recognized Native Americans as people and citizens, with all the rights and freedoms that go with it. The act to grant citizenship to Native American people took place in 1924. That makes Jim's story all the more important because it was 12 years earlier that Jim was set to represent the U.S. in track and field for the 1912 Olympic Games. Jim had impressive results by any standard. He qualified for both the pentathlon and decathlon for the American team. The 24-year-old set sail for Stockholm, Sweden in June 1912. Abel Kvyat, a Jewish man and Thorpe's roommate on the ship to Sweden, that he and Thorpe weren't given keys to rooms like the rest of the competitors. They were expected to sleep in steerage below. But during the voyage, Jim trained on the ship, and there were stories of how he led workouts too. At the Olympics, Jim's performance surpassed all expectations. He dominated in both the pentathlon and decathlon, winning gold medals in both events. He remains the only athlete in history to have done so. In the pentathlon, he won 4 of the 5 events: long jump, discus, sprint, and wrestling. The one event he didn't win was the javelin. He finished 3rd in the world. According to one source, Jim actually tried to throw the javelin once before in the Olympic trials. At the time, he didn't know he could throw it with a running start. He threw it standing still and placed 2nd. Back at the Olympics, he also took part in the grueling decathlon, a 10-sport event. To give you an idea of his abilities, Thorpe finished 1st in 4 of the events: shot put, high jump, 110-meter hurdles, and 1,500 meters. He finished 3rd in 4 other events and 4th in 2 more. Shortly after the Olympics, he broke the Amateur Athletic Union's all-around championship record by winning 7 of 10 events outright and finishing 2nd in the 3 others that make up the decathlon. His record-breaking scores handedly beat all of his rivals and would remain unbroken for 3 decades. Still, perhaps more impressive than his talent, his abilities, and his records is the manner in which he achieved all this. Look closely at this picture. You'll notice that Jim is wearing different shoes and mismatched socks. You see, the day of his race, someone stole his shoes. I was unable to find any record to know if the culprit was ever identified, but it seems that prejudice remains strong and ever present for people of Jim's heritage. Losing your shoes before a race for a runner is usually devastating, and he was in no position to simply go down to the store and get a new pair as we do today. Still, this didn't stop Jim. He looked around and found 2 different shoes, old and worn out, in a dumpster. One was larger than the other, and he had to wear an extra sock to make it fit a little better. And yes, these are the shoes he wore when he competed in the Olympic Games. When he returned to the United States, Jim was hailed as a hero and honored with a ticker-tape parade in New York City. Though prejudice continued to follow him and many negative stories were reported, all of them later found to be slander, Jim remained humble and good-natured. He found success in many ways too. For example, serving as the first president of what later became known as the National Football League, or NFL, and later made a living off speaking engagements, teaching youth not to cuss, get good exercise, eat right, and go to bed early. With these opportunities, he traveled the country and lived a simple life, so as to fish and be in nature whenever he desired. It was said of Jim Thorpe, he drank but not to excess. He was most often described as genial and generous. He especially liked speaking with school groups. His son described, "Dad was just a pretty happy-go-lucky individual. He was just a good man." There is no need to embellish either the personal trials of Jim or his enormous athletic accomplishments. The truth is honorable enough. Thank you, Jim. Good show.